All right, let's dive into something that is absolutely fundamental for any pathology trainee, the CAP protocol for lung cancer resections. We're going to deconstruct this thing piece by piece so you can tackle these specimens with total confidence, all the way from the grossing bench to that final stage. So, here's our game plan. We're going to follow the pathologist's journey. We'll start with the why this standardized approach matters so much. Then we'll get into the real details of sizing up the primary tumor, tracking down any spread to the lymph nodes, checking our margins, and looking for distant disease, and finally, putting all those clues together for the definitive pathologic stage. Okay, so first things first. Before we get into the weeds, we have to understand the framework. Why is this protocol so critical, and what are the basic ground rules for using it? The whole point of the CAP protocol, really, is to make sure that every single pathologist, no matter where they are, is collecting the exact same crucial data points. That consistency is everything. It's what allows the clinical team to accurately figure out a patient's prognosis and, make the absolute best treatment decisions. And this is super important. You have to know when this protocol actually applies. It's specifically for those definitive resections, we're talking lobectomies, pneumonectomies, of primary lung carcinomas. It's not for small biopsies, it's not for cytology, and it's not for other tumors like mesothelioma or sarcoma. Those guys have their own set of rules. All right, now we get to the heart of it. We're zeroing in on the specimen itself, gathering all the evidence we can from that main tumor to figure out the T in our TNM stage. So when you get that specimen, you're basically an investigator. Your first job is to interrogate that tumor. You're asking, how big is it really? What's the histologic type? How aggressive does it look? What's its grade? These are the foundational facts that start building the whole story. Okay, now for non-mucinous adenocarcinomas. This is a huge point. You actually report two sizes, the total size and the invasive size. And listen up, for staging, you only use the size of the invasive component. Why? Because we know that a patient's prognosis is tied much more closely to that invasive part, not the overall tumor dimension that includes any in situ or lipidic growth. Sticking with those non-mucinous adenos, we have a pretty specific grading system that's based on what you see under the scope. It basically boils down to this. If 20% or more of that tumor is made up of high-grade patterns, think solid micropapillary, it's automatically a grade 3 or poorly differentiated. Getting that percentage right is a key part of your report. Here's something else you absolutely have to have on your radar: spread through air spaces, or STAS. When you see these little nests or single cells of tumor floating around in the air spaces just beyond the main tumor, that's a defined form of invasion, and it is a huge deal. It's a major red flag for a higher risk of recurrence. Let me give you a pro tip. An elastic stain is going to be your absolute best friend when you're assessing the pleura. Visceral pleural invasion, VPI, can be incredibly tricky to call on a standard H&E slide. This special stain just makes those elastic layers pop, so you can say with confidence whether that tumor has broken through or not. And when you're looking at that pleura, you're basically putting it into one of three buckets. PL0 means the tumor is contained, no breach. But PL1, where it gets past that elastic layer, and PL2, where it hits the actual surface, both of those count as positive VPI. This is so important because finding this can upstage a T1 tumor all the way to a T2A, completely independent of its size. Okay, so we have thoroughly interrogated the primary tumor. Now we've got to figure out where it might have gone. We're on the hunt for the N in TNM, following the trail to the regional lymph nodes to look for any signs of metastasis. To do the N staging correctly, you've got to speak the language of the IASLC lymph node map. Think of yourself as a cartographer of the chest. Knowing which stations are positive, whether it's hilar, mediastinal, subcarinal, is absolutely fundamental to getting the N category right, and that has massive implications for the patient's treatment. Now, when you find a positive lymph node, your job isn't quite done. You have to look for one more thing: extranodal extension, or ENE. This is when the tumor has literally busted out of the lymph node's capsule. Now, finding ENE doesn't actually change the PN category itself, but, and this is a big but, you absolutely must report if it's there. It's a sign of more aggressive disease. All right, we're in the home stretch. Now it's time to check the boundaries. We need to be sure the surgeon got the whole thing out, which means we have to look very carefully at all the margins. And we also look for any evidence of distant spread, which is what defines our M category. Meticulously checking every single surgical margin is just non-negotiable. You've got the bronchial margin, the vascular margin, that parenchymal staple line. You have to look at all of them to say if the resection was truly complete. And here's a key point that trips people up. The visceral pleura is a site of tumor invasion that affects the T stage. It is not a surgical margin. So the M category is for distant metastasis. We assign PM1A when we find pathologic proof of spread, but it's still within the thoracic cavity. Things like finding a separate tumor nodule in the opposite lung, or seeing tumors studding the pleura, or confirming a malignant pleural effusion. Any of those findings are definitive signs of metastatic disease. Okay, we have gathered all of our evidence. We've assessed the tumor, the nodes, and any metastatic sites. Now it's time to put it all together. We can now combine our T, N, and M findings to assemble that final, definitive pathologic stage. But wait, there are a few crucial modifiers to know about. First up, the YI prefix. If your patient got chemo or radiation before their surgery, you have to indicate that in the stage. You just add a YI right at the beginning, so it becomes YIP-TNM. That tells everybody you're staging what's left of the disease after treatment. Then there's the R prefix. This one is for a pretty specific situation. You use it when you're staging a tumor that has come back after the patient had a documented period of being disease-free. It flags it as a recurrence. And finally, what if you find multiple separate primary tumors at the same time? Well, you stage the case based on the highest T lesion, and then you add this M suffix. This is how you show that you're dealing with multiplicity, which is different from a single tumor that is spread within the lung. And this table really brings it all home, synthesizing how we determine that final T category. You can see how the stage progresses with size, of course, but look closer, you can also see how direct invasion into structures like the visceral pleura or the chest wall can cause the T category to jump up, sometimes dramatically. It's the perfect summary of all your gross and microscopic work. You know, when it's all said and done, a great pathology report is so much more than just a checklist or a series of data points. It is the foundational narrative of that patient's cancer journey. Every single detail you report, from the invasive size to STAS to the margin status, it all guides every single clinical decision that comes next. Your work tells that story.